Hi everyone, Jesse here with eTrailer. Today we'll be taking a look at and I'll show you how to install the Demco Air Force One braking system on our 2025 Jeep Wrangler Unlimited. There's going to be 5 main components to look into when setting up your vehicle for flat tow, starting with the base plate. This is going to be the structural mounting point for everything else. And then the second main component is our tow bar. That's going to be the physical link between towed vehicle and motorhome. Then we have our braking system. This is here to help you come to a safe stop by not only relying on the motorhome's brakes, but also using the towed vehicle's brakes to help you come to that stop. Then we have our safety cables. These are here in case of a catastrophic disconnect. If anything were to fail, those will hold everything together so you can get pulled over safely to the side of the road. Then we have our diode wiring, which is going to keep you safe and legal out there on the road by sending a signal from the tail lights on your motorhome to the tail lights on the towed vehicle and allow those to function properly. So that means your tail lights, your turn signals, and your brake lights. This is going to be a good kit for you if your motorhome has air brakes, because that's how it's going to work. It's going to take air from your motorhome's brake system and send it through this main unit to an actuator that's mounted to your brake pedal, and that actuator is going to pull that brake pedal towards the floorboard. The kit will come with the breakaway switch, which is here in case of a catastrophic disconnect. If you are disconnected, this will pull out, and that's going to apply the brakes on the Jeep to allow you to come to a safe stop. And also, while we're down here, here's the air fitting. This is where your motorhome will send air into the main unit of our Air Force One to make those brakes work. Here's a closer look at that actuator I was talking about. You can see it has a bracket to mount it to our brake pedal, and then there's an anchor on our firewall to allow it to pull towards it. And while we're down here, this is our transmitter for our wireless coach link, which we'll take a look at inside the motorhome. So here is our wireless coach link. This would be mounted somewhere on the dash or just somewhere that it's visible. And what this does is whenever the brakes are applied on your Jeep, this light will light up, and that allows you to know that everything's functioning properly. You'll see other kits that come with an LED light that you have to stick onto the rearview mirror of the towed vehicle, and sometimes that's really hard to see. Like a sunny day like today, there's probably a reflection on that windshield. Or if your rear view camera just isn't up to spec, that's going to be difficult to see. So I almost always recommend getting the kit that comes with the wireless monitor, just so you know everything is working. The kit also comes with everything you'll need to get the motorhome side sorted out. So there's going to be a tank and some T-fittings to tap into your motorhome's air brakes, and also this fitting and hose to connect everything together. If you have any more questions or concerns about this or any other flat tow components, please feel free to reach out to me. But really, that's about all there is to it. If you're asking my opinion, if your motorhome has air brakes, this is about the best braking system you can get. It just seems to work every time and be very reliable. As for the installation process, it does involve getting under your motorhome and cutting into some of your air brake lines, and also doing quite a bit of work on the towed vehicle. So I'd understand if that's not something that you're looking to do yourself. Maybe you don't have the time, the space, or the tools to get it done. Feel free to check out our dealer locator to find someone local to you that would be happy to get it installed for you. If you are looking to see how this gets installed, then just follow along and I'll walk you through the process. To begin our installation, I like to find my mounting point for my breakaway switch and my air line. So we have our 6-pole bracket here. I just mounted our breakaway switch here on one of the bolts that we're using to mount that, and I left it with some washers so we're able to kind of hide it away when we're not hooked up, but when we needed to, we can pull it out. And then my 6-pole bracket has a hole for my air fitting here. I did have to take it off the original bracket and then reinstall it on here, but you just need a couple of wrenches and you can get that done. Then from there, we're routing our air line up with our 2 wires that come off our breakaway switch. I just followed our diode wiring, which we ran already, but just tuck it behind the grill and come up here. And then when I got here, my 2 wires coming off my breakaway switch weren't quite long enough, so I luckily had some extra wires to just tie in. I used heat shrink butt connectors to make a watertight seal. I tucked those under our intake here. and then started our first connection, which is the orange wire. With this orange wire, you'll also have some extra red wire in your kit. So what I did was on the end of that, I just combined the two because we will need to run this to power also. And then on this end, we have our included fuse holder, and make sure the fuse is not in there already, which ours is not. I'll open this up. Make sure your fuse is not in there yet. That'll be the last thing we do. And then there's a 10mm nut here for our battery connection. As far as mounting the main unit, I just used some hook and loop to fasten it down to the top of our fuse box here. I like using this because that makes it removable in case somebody needs to get into here. They can just pop it off, and what I'll do is leave some extra slack in the wires so they're able to do that. But you can really mount it anywhere that you have clearance. I prefer to be close to the battery just to make our connections easier. And then we'll talk about the other wire coming off of our breakaway switch. That's going to tie into our main unit. So that black wire ties into one of the black wires on our main unit. And then the other black wire will be a ground. So I just crimped a ring terminal onto that. And I did have to extend it out. You'll see it turns white here, but just to reach our factory ground right here, which I'll make our connection with a 10mm. And you can see I already have some diodes grounded there, so that's going to be a good grounding point for us. And then our air line that we connected up front, it routed with our two wires from our breakaway switch, and I kind of came around the battery here. This is going to plug into the inside or the end fitting on your main unit. Mine's kind of weird. The sticker must have been installed backwards or something like that, so I just ended up writing down which one is which to keep it in my head. But to make this connection, basically all of our air fitting connections, you simply push it in until you hear it click. And then if you want to remove it, say you have a leak or something that you're trying to fix, just push on that ring and it'll pop out. Now with our red wire, we also tied in an airline tubing into the outside of our main unit. Then I just followed this kind of wiring area across, because we need to get into the vehicle. So right down there is going to be this grommet. If you just pop it out and then drill about a 1/2-inch hole should be enough. We can just slide this through both the airline and our wire and then pop it back into place, and that'll let us route our wires into the inside. Now we ran our vacuum hose across our engine bay over to where our brake booster is, because we have to tie into our factory vacuum system. So I've kind of already started hooking everything up here, but I'll just show you what I was doing. So here's a look like this with this line connected, but what I did was pop this out of this quick disconnect. You just pop that red tab off, then you can pop the hose off. Then I snipped it right there, and I took our plastic T-fitting that's in our kit and attached it to our factory vacuum line. I had to kind of work around it with a heat gun to make it malleable and make it want to slide onto position, but just be careful with it and patient, and you can get that connected, and then you have a nice tight factory connection. Then with the other end of the T, I just cut off a little chunk of our vacuum hose, slid it over the T-fitting. Then I installed a check valve. We want the white side facing towards our T there. And what I'll have to do now is do that same heat gun maneuver with our factory line, get our check valve installed there, and then slide our main unit line right over our T. May help to add some soapy water to make it slide on a little bit easier. Now inside the vehicle, we're ready to get our actuators set up. I actually already did it just because it takes some dialing in to get everything set up how you want it. But what I did was I started by switching our short bolts here to the long bolts that are in our kit, just because this pedal arm is kind of on the thick side, so it just helped me be able to get all of our nuts installed. But then I mocked up our actuator just using the bracket like this, and what I was looking for is a straight line while the brake pedal is depressed. So I found that, so that was going to be the center hole with our anchor with our bracket. So I just had to use a razor blade to cut out some of this rubber material here, and then use the two self-tappers on the outside to get our bracket in place, and then the center one for the anchor. And as for adjusting the tension on that, there is an Allen grub nut there, so you just want to loosen that and find it. You just want a little bit of play in your cable, and that should be good. Then after that, we moved on to getting everything wired up. So there's one long white wire that comes off your actuator that splits into two wires. So the blue end will go into the red wire on our wireless coach link here. And then the brown will go into that red wire that we ran into the cab from the engine bay. And then off of our wireless coach link, we will have two wires also. So as I said, that red one connects to the blue on our actuator. Then the white one is going to be our ground. So you could find a ground inside. There's probably a couple behind this plastic panel here, but since the Jeep is so easy to run out into the engine bay, I just went ahead and extended it out to the engine bay, and there's a factory ground right there on the driver's side panel. Once it's all wired up, you'll just want to plug in that air line just the same way as we did on the main unit. And then we'll clean up all of our wires, make sure they're not in the way where you could kick them. And then with the coach link, I'm just going to tuck it up inside this panel here out of the way. The kit does come with some hook and loop fasteners that you can use, but I just had a scrap piece of double-sided tape that I'll use. But you really just want to get everything out of the way so there's no risk in kicking it while you're driving. Now we'll install our fuse into our fuse holder. Just get it lined up and push it in. Now we'll have to go inside the vehicle and get our reed switch adjusted. Now for our reed switch, this is here to send our brake light signal to our coach link. So we need to make sure that it's not on all the time. As you can see right now, it's off. If it is on all the time, then I'd check my cable tension first, but then you can also make an adjustment by loosening up this clamp here with a Phillips head screwdriver and moving it back and forth. But as long as it's not on all the time, what you want to do is just push the brake pedal in, then pull it out about 1/4 inch. You want that light to come on. And if it's not coming on, as I said, you can adjust it with that collar. But that's how you check that and get your reed switch dialed in. Another thing we can check right now is our coach link. Of course, this would usually be mounted on the dash on the motorhome, but just for testing purposes, I plugged it into our outlet in our Jeep. I'll turn the ignition on. Then I'll do the same thing with the reed switch, or with the actuator that I was doing for testing the reed switch. Pull it back, and you'll see that turn on. And that means everything's working as it should. So now we're under our motorhome. We need to get our motorhome side hooked up. So I'd recommend first just releasing all the air out of your braking system. Just do it ahead of time so you don't forget about it. Then once you have that done, come under the motorhome to your air brake system, and we need to locate two lines. We need to locate our metered line here, which every motorhome is going to be different. So one way to find out the metered line, if you don't have a picture or you aren't able to identify it, is to pop it out and then have somebody step on the brakes. You only have air going through this line whenever the brakes are applied. So that'll help you know. And then we also need our supply line, which is going to be usually this thick gray line. So you look for that. I just marked them both because what I'll do is cut back some of this loom here. I'm going to clean our lines off and make a nice clean cut with some hose cutters. Then we'll tie in our T's and extend those out to where we're going to mount our unit. Now I like to mount up our tank assembly, which comes with a bracket built in and some hardware to get mounted. So what I always look for is two existing holes on the frame. A lot of times they'll match up with the holes in the bracket. If you can't find holes that'll match up in a good spot, I just recommend drilling some holes. Just find somewhere sturdy to mount it, and you only need 2 bolts holding it in, and that'll hold it nice and sturdy. Another thing is, It wants to be mounted in this orientation. You can mount it at a slight angle. Just make sure that this part here is the lowest part. Now, as far as where our lines are going, this fitting up here on our tank, that's going to be our supply line. Then this one on top of this module here is our metered air. And then this one on the bottom is going to go back to the rear of the vehicle. That's going to be our towed vehicle connection. And to make all of those connections, it's very simple. You'll just take your airline and plug it in, and you'll kind of feel it pop into place. That means it's locked in and you have an airtight connection. For our towed vehicle connection, you have this fitting that's already mounted to a bracket. So what I did was I drilled a couple holes just bigger than the bolts that come with it and mounted it up. And then the first line that I routed was this connection. That way I know how much I have left over for my metered and my supply line. So I just routed up, followed some wiring harnesses and zip tied it down to it and plugged it in the same way we plug in all of our other connections. Now that we have everything mounted, I came back to our Motorhome's air brake system where I talked about how I was going to cut lines and put the T's in. So I did that. As I said, you just want to make sure your lines are clean, get them with a nice clean cut, and then just push those hoses into the T fittings just like we do with the other connections. And then from there, I cut our extra wire in half and ran a line from those T's towards where our tank assembly is. Just make sure that you mark one on both sides so that you know which one is which. So I marked our supply line with some blue painter's tape, and I also marked it on the end, and then we can make that connection. So now we'll make our connections at our tank assembly. I'm going to make a clean cut as straight as I can. This is my supply line, the one that I marked. So I'll plug it into this fitting that comes off of our tank here. And then I'll do the same thing, cut our metered line and plug it into that one. As far as the routing goes, just follow some of the factory wiring. Make sure you stay away from any hot or moving components and zip tie it all down nice and tight. Now what you want to do is let your motorhome idle just enough to build up your normal brake pressure, and then go through all of our connections with some soapy water, spray it down, and just stop and look for bubbles. That means there's a leak. If you do have a leak, just pop your hose out by pushing down that collar and recut it and try it again. I already went through all of ours and we don't have any leaks, so we're ready to hook up to our car. That's about it. That's going to do it for our look at and installation of the Demco Air Force One braking system on our 2025 Jeep Wrangler Unlimited.